Well, I have to say that first letter that we read, first epistle from St. Paul's letter to the Ephesians, is quite fascinating. He uses a few phrases that really grab your attention. Armor of God. Put on the armor of God. He says that twice. The armor of God. So that you may be able to stand firm against the tactics of the devil. Curious phrase, isn't it? The tactics of the devil. What are those tactics of the devil? What is the armor of God? Clearly, St. Paul is telling us that there's a battle out there, and we're all involved in this battle. It's a spiritual battle. So if you're in a battle, first you have to know who your enemy is. And in this case, in the Christian spiritual battle, there are two enemies. One is the devil, and the other is myself, yourself, right? That's who we're fighting against. It's not everybody else out there. It's the devil, and it's what's inside of us. So recently, on a pilgrimage to Poland in Prague, we visited this ancient cathedral in Prague called St. Vitus Cathedral. And in that neighborhood, as we're walking down, we could come into these little old homes that were in the villages, and one of them had a display of coats of armor of knights from Middle Ages, and the different weapons they used. And you saw these coats of armor. They're shining, and they're very fine metalwork, and there's a helmet, and the whole body is covered. I'm thinking, it must be really hard to fight inside one of those things. It was hard enough for me when I was a sixth grader, dressing up in the uniform they gave you for football, the shoulder pads and all that. Like it's like really hard. But if you were in that coat of armor, then swords couldn't pierce it, arrows couldn't pierce it. Later, I suppose, bullets could pierce it, but it was kind of clunky, and it's kind of hard to fight inside that coat of armor. You might be protected, but it's hard to fight. And in a fight with the devil, the less you have, the more powerful you are, because the more you have, the more you can hold on to. That's why the virtue of poverty and detachment from material things really equips us to fight well against the devil. So what is this armor of God? Is it the armor that God wore? I doubt it. He didn't need any armor. So it's the armor he made for us to protect us from the devil and ourselves. And what is that armor? It's the sacraments. That's the armor of God. Put it on. The Holy Eucharist, the sacrament of confession, and the other sacraments. It's prayer and it's sacrifice. We hear about this all the time during the Lenten seasons. And it's important to remember that in a spiritual battle, the best defense is a good offense. So let's go on the offense of receiving the sacraments frequently and with devotion. And then let's also go on the offense by praying more. In this way, we keep the devil at a distance. What are the tactics of the devil? I came up with 7 words. Right? This is not the Catechism of the Catholic Church, and this is not the Summa Theologica of St. Thomas Aquinas, but this is the way I think it works. All right? The 7 Ds of the devil. Here are the tactics. It begins with deception, and then that leads to dissatisfaction or sadness in the soul, and then that leads to distrust. Distrust inevitably leads to disobedience, which leads to dishonesty. And then what follows is destruction and death. Those are the 7 Ds of the devil. Those are the tactics, and it always works that way. He's not very original, but he never takes a vacation. What is the deception that the devil uses when he approaches Eve? He makes her feel like she got gypped. You can't eat the apple? She should have said, look, I get to eat everything else. I get to eat Liz's lunches every day. I get to eat soup. I get to eat pizza. I get to have ice cream. We've got treats upstairs. You can't eat that out. Now she feels oppressed. And she's been deceived because she's not oppressed. She's been greatly blessed. And she lost sight of it. She's been deceived. And then she becomes disenchanted, right, with all this. That deception then leads to the dissatisfaction. And St. Josemaria had that insight that sadness is an ally of the enemy. Every week when we gather as members of Opus Dei, we go over our examination of conscience. That's always a question. Do I realize that sadness is an ally of the enemy? And then what follows is the distrust, and then the disobedience of Eve, and then the dishonesty and destruction and death. And that's ultimately what the devil wants. He wants the destruction of the human race. So what are the remedies for these tactics of the devil? The way we fight against deception is to live in reality. Instead of focusing on the one apple we can't eat, we should focus on the 72,000 other things we can eat and say, I've been greatly blessed. And then in terms of dissatisfaction, we fight that by being grateful. And instead of distrust, we give trust. Instead of disobedience, we offer obedience. Instead of dishonesty, we offer honesty. And instead of destruction, we build. Instead of death, we cherish life and we defend life from the moment of conception to natural death.